you can use whatever code you want. Can you hold space for me right now? Because it's not going to be pretty. Yes, I can.
Mm.
Okay, cool. Then I'm holding space. I have no judgment. I have no opinion. I'm not going to defend myself. I'm not going to defend you. I'm just going to allow you to do whatever it is that you need to do. And then at the end, we have a phrase of, are you complete?
Welcome to The King Within, a podcast for men who seem to have it all, yet feel like they're losing what matters most. I'm Mike Salemi and I've been there. Successful on paper but disconnected on the inside. This isn't about grinding harder. It's about mastering your emotions, leading with calm strength, and rebuilding trust at home. Each week we dive into real stories and tools for becoming the man your family runs towards, not away from. Because you didn't build this life to lose yourself in it. This is The King Within. Let's do the work. So one thing that's really top of mind is challenge, fights, conflict. Like that, the energy of that and how that's experienced in relationship, individually and in the relationship. But when you see, and let's see where this goes, but when you find a couple that gets stuck, let's say the same fight, we can make an assumption whether it's around money, whether it's around, I don't know, choices around food. But when a couple gets in the same fight over and over and over, can you start helping me and us start maybe peeling back the layers of what might actually be happening underneath of this repetitive conflict that tends to arise? Or what goes through your mind? Where do you tend to look or want to explore within that?
It's the $1,000,000 question, I guess, right? So, where do we jump in with this one? So, I would say one of the things that I'm most sensitive to is trying to first understand their biases, my bias, where I'm sensitive, where they may or may not be as sensitive to me, and understand that my historical conditioning creates a filter, a lens. A lot of times when I'm working with clients and couples, most of them are old enough to remember Elton John and his psychedelic outfits and his glasses. So I refer to people in that regards. We wear these glasses, and if they are orange tinted glasses, we see the whole world through orange. And they might have a purple color glasses and they're seeing the world through purple. One of the things that begins the journey is we have to take the glasses off in order to gain some level of clarity. So for me, the colored glasses are our conditioned ideas about how we feel, what we believe, our limiting beliefs, our associations, how we've interpreted who or what we are as an individual since infancy and through childhood. That's reinforced. That evolves into then how I see others and I see the world. And in particular, we're talking about relationships. So really getting clear with both of them, understanding and on some level appreciating that. That then leads into, until we take the glasses off, we truly, I have experienced, we're not going to solve our problems at all. And what that looks like is, one, the courage and curiosity to say and experience what could be beyond the colors of these glasses is one factor. The other factor is that a lot of times people approach this where, well, if I just switch my glasses to a different color, will that help? And then that gets into just reshuffling. It's like a shell game. We play with ourselves and try to repackage our historical conditioning, which that too, I feel like doesn't reconcile the heart and the mind as to what's really going on with those underlying dynamics within the relationship. And so it's an invitation and a journey for them individually to take off the glasses, which would be similar to psychological terms like coming out of one's psychological trance, meaning that I'm stuck in a psychological, emotional framework, mentally and emotionally, and I just don't seem to be able to get out of it. I refer a lot of times to like being stuck in the rabbit hole. I've gone down and I just cannot see the left to nor to the right. So it's about inviting them to come back out from that perspective. And we can get into the techniques that one could explore to do that. But unless both of them are unless they're willing to take those glasses off and then look at the quote supposed problem, if both don't take the glasses off, then we're still talking over, through, under each other with our biases and our hurts and our conditioning. All of that is still active and present. And no matter how logical, grounded, or stoic I'm presenting something, it's not landing. Psychologically, they are present. Their eardrums hear the reverberation. They know that there's talk, but it's truly an interpretation of through my conditioned response. And so until that's addressed, it's I have found very difficult for relationships to get aligned and work through, transmute, overcome, address these conflicts that you were referring to that we have. So if I were to summarize it as A, acknowledge that we have glasses, that they're biased, be willing to be curious and have the courage to take the glasses off genuinely. And then number 3, explore within myself where and how my conditioning makes it difficult for me to want to take those glasses off and want to keep them on because I've used that as a form of protection and safety. And we can get into that as well, but there's all kinds of whys. And then ultimately is then still addressing the conflict, but now with a fresh set of eyes and an open heart. And I feel like if both are willing to approach something similar to that, then there's hope to work through that, because then there is genuine, no aged regressed or no trance activated. We're not triggered. We've minimized how much I'm coming from a place of frustration, lack, a belief, or an interpretation. That's how my dad used to handle that, or that's how my mom used to handle it. Now I've learned how to cope with that for this way. And those protections fall to the side, right? And then we can have a more honest conversation, and then we can be vulnerable. Yeah, I can say I acknowledge my likes and biases are because I've been trying to protect myself in a relationship. And that's how I watched my parents relate. And I thought that was a successful way to manage my approval of them. And now that I take the glasses off, I can see clearly. I can see, hey, I had been operating in that way. And it's understandable that you might be frustrated with me from coming from that place. So then we start getting vulnerable. We start talking about our conditioning as if it's something that is acknowledged fully and you're considerate of how it's impacting the relationship. And then I feel like it's reciprocal. Then people start talking. Then the other person starts getting a little bit softer. And then next thing you know, we're dealing with the conflict, but like I said, with those fresh set of eyes. And then that really brings about restoring, transmuting, healing, whatever word that fits for us. But there's a reconciliation of this conflict in a more meaningful way. And then you can approach it as such. The last thing I'll say here, Mike, is that I've experienced where if people still have a tinge of an agenda, it is, I need you to change. Like, I need you to acknowledge your conflict with me. And until you, quote unquote, change your literal behaviors, we're going to always have conflict. So it's almost like putting one foot in and one foot out of taking the glasses off. Yeah, a lot of times people are looking for the other to ensure that they make the changes to eliminate the conflict. Like if you need to do X, Y, and Z in order for this conflict to go away. So they're 1 foot in of taking the glasses partially off, and it's still, on the tip of their nose, so to speak. They're kind of like bifocals at that point. They could see beyond it, but there's a subtle agenda with this reconciliation part. So for me, until they fully take the glasses off, take responsibility for their part, really consider how their conditioning has been driving the bus on how they are seeing things through those orange or purple tinted glasses, remove them, and be vulnerable, and also then work through the conflict, because that gives you, if you will, no pun intended here, a fighting chance to work through the conflict. If not, you're still in and out of, and mostly out of or in your aged, regressed, or trance, or your old conditioned patterns. And that's when we can't resolve conflict.
When you were talking about, like, I really appreciate the example of protecting, right? Like, and I think giving more color as we are continuing to give more color into some of the ways that this can look will be super helpful. And that piece that you just shared about expecting the other person to change. And I want to like define some terms as well. I know you and I were talking about that before. One of the things I'd love to hear when you're talking about I'm expecting the other person to change, can you break down, like, how would you define codependency? Healthy codependency, if there is such, unhealthy codependency, and that expectation that, or I'm doing this so that the other person will change, or they have to change. Can you break down what is codependency to you, and especially unhealthy codependency?
So codependency for me, I'll say there's multi levels. So I would say in my relationship with Zaina, there are some physical codependencies that I have with her in relationship. So I am codependent upon her showing up and being physically present for us if we want to be intimate sexually and sensually. There's a dependency that I can lift heavy weight. So if we're moving or I need to carry things from the car upstairs, there's an inherent dependency on my contribution to our relationship. So for me, there's different levels, and those are just physical examples where I would say codependency, which is the typical language I think we use within the realm of self-development and psychology and spirituality. Codependency, I would say 99.9% of the time is dysfunctional,
Wow.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
And for me, if we think and feel like my partner is responsible to take away my mental and emotional and spiritual dissatisfaction with life, or my pain, or you fill in the blank, that to me is when it becomes very toxic, because we're looking for someone outside of ourselves to provide happiness, peace, that is more of a psychological based understanding. So I am giving myself away in my psyche to the power of someone outside of myself to put something inside of me, mentally or emotionally, so that I can feel okay and good or satisfied, or at least peaceful within myself. So to me, that's where the codependency is toxic, negative. I'm not sure the right word that lands, but I don't find it functional. Maybe that's a good word to say. I don't find that area of life, codependency, as being functional. We have to survive in some level within life, navigating life, paying the bills. So there's environmental factors. I'm codependent. My partner and her contributions, right or wrong, good or bad. So how do we take care of the home? How do we take care of kids? How do we get them this? How do we get them that? You know, there is an inherent dependency that people have upon each other. And I think those are functional and necessary to survive and thrive in life. It is ultimately that the psychological codependency that I think gets us into trouble, where we think, Mike, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, that satisfies all of Lauren's filters, conditioned. It's almost like going through all these different toll gates, right? That you have to pass for her within her own mental and emotional well-being, for her to say, Mike's a good guy. I'm not triggered. He's actually soothing. I'm using my experience of Mike and soothing myself with it. And then therefore, sometimes you're the best husband in the world, and other times when you don't do X, Y, and Z and take away my inner conflict, you know, you're the worst guy in the world. And we all deal with that. And I'm picking on you, but that
No,
applies
this
to
is yeah,
every
yeah.
relationship under the sun. And that's where I feel like this dependency criteria can be helpful when we look at it through multi-layers.
That's fascinating, Jay, and I really appreciate that. And I want to, there's something that comes up in at least like I want to say like I don't know, the modern men's movement, like the men's work that I'm familiar with, and even just what I hear a lot in relationships. And and I'm clearly generalizing here, right? But just for the sake of putting this out, let's just say a wife. A wife says, I don't feel safe with you. I don't trust you. I don't trust you because you're out of integrity, right? You're not doing, I don't know, certain things that you said you would do, or what a man of integrity lives. So I don't trust you, or I don't feel safe with you. And so if I'm to open up, if I'm to want to have, intimacy or sex or whatever with what the man really wants, both people want, but let's say the man's really driving that. What's your thoughts on what's underneath that for both people? I need you to be a certain way so I can trust you more or feel safer with you. And yeah, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think the trusting in the lack of trust all begins and ends within oneself.
Mm.
So my fundamental bias is that trust or no trust is still an inside job first and foremost.
Mm.
And so then it just becomes a journey to ask oneself, okay, is my lack of trust because I am interpreting all of these behaviors through an old pattern of conditioning that I have and ideas that I have with men or women, whatever the dynamics are. So exploring one's inner world about this concept around trust, what I trust, what I don't trust, I think is full stop. That's where the initial accountability and responsibility around trust needs to happen. I think if both persons were to first look at, is my distrust on behalf of my conditioned patterns, or is it on behalf of you and I have another option here is we both have an agreement. The
Yeah.
agreement could be we value quality time together, and we had none this week, so to speak. And now you're choosing to go out with the boys and get drunk or party or stay out late or just socialize. It doesn't have to be drinking. And that would have been the only window this week of quality time. But you both have made an agreement that we will prioritize the relationship and its quality time as number one. Now, if that was repeatedly violated, so to speak, over and over again, can someone draw the conclusion of a lack of trust about what that agreement means for each of them? Yes. That trust can erode from something very practical or an existing agreement that you have. So then it would foster, ideally, a conversation about, we have an agreement. Can we just take a step back and say, what do agreements mean for us individually and then collectively? If we're going to treat this agreement with the level of trust and honor, are we vulnerable to every other agreement that we have? So can we have that conversation? So I think it leads to those hopeful conversations to take a step back and ask the bigger questions. And then you can get into getting into the very specific agreement that you have and say, my experience of this agreement to be honored is X. What's Y for you? And do we need to revisit this agreement? Maybe the agreement needs to be adapted. Maybe we need to get either more clarity about the practical application of this agreement so that my expectations in any ambiguity with this agreement that I had that I didn't maybe give as much voice to is further detailed or delineated so that we move forward with this revised agreement and learning from what it meant to have these our respective experiences with this lack of showing up for each other in whatever way that might have looked like. So in summary, Mike, I think of it as the trust or no trust ultimately is a signal to the relationship that we need to have a heartfelt conversation. That's to me the number one criteria or the number one indicator, rather than minimizing each other's perspectives and blowing off, et cetera. So, those are some key things maybe worth considering.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because when you were out here as well, like one of the questions when we were hanging out on the couch that you posed to Lauren and I, when we were just having a discussion, was the invitation for us to individually clarify and define what is connection to each of us. And Lauren, in the lens of let's say the Enneagram, Lauren's core type is a type 2, the helper. As you know, my core type is a type 1. The same for you and Zaina. I've also got clients that fall into basically the same pattern, let's just say. And what I'm hearing too is just the important, whether it's connection, whether it's trust, whether it's integrity, like the importance of defining or clarifying, deepening individually what and how do we experience these things that we so deeply want, right? Like we want to, yes, trust, I think at the deepest level, trust ourselves, trust our experience of our partner, to feel connected with our partner. But I thought that was really profound because it's not a question that we really ever really explored, as like wild as that is. And I would imagine many people too, I would say the vast majority, have not explored how they define that, and then what can come up from that type of dialogue. And so if you have thoughts on that, I'd love to hear. And I'd love to also, as an example, through using the Enneagram as like an identification or of patterns, let's say, I think the heart of what I'd love to ask is not only why is it so important to get this clarity in relationship, but also to, like you had mentioned multiple times, the filters. Can you give us some examples of those filters? And let's just say a type 1 and a type 2 in a scenario like this.
Yeah. So just real quick, a couple of definitions of terms for ourselves, right? So
Yeah.
just I'll throw some names out there. So the American Psychological Association defines personality as patterning of thinking, feeling, emoting, and behaving. So the personality assessment that I co-created helps us understand that through the lens of the Enneagram. So it takes the theory of personality types, personality methodology, and says, okay, within that umbrella, the Enneagram is just one way to do that. There are 9 personality types. From a personality perspective, all of them have a strengths, plural, and weaknesses. They're gender neutral, age neutral. You are born with a predisposition for one. All other 8 come and go in regards to the intensity of how you either engage with that type, or how you avoid that type, or how you use them situationally. From there, through childhood all the way up, we put on these personas, which is another way of saying a mask of ideas about how we see ourselves, others in the world. We take on these fundamental beliefs about ourselves. And in the world that I teach and coach on in regards to the Enneagram, so there's 9 different types, and yet there's 9 core beliefs of a sense of lack, agitation, and separation that lead to your personality type's belief system as a result of that, right? So maybe just restate it as in infancy and early childhood, we have this sense of lack, separation, and agitation. It's a sensation. It's an experience in the body. As the nervous system matures, I'm sure we've talked about this before with Luca. He sees an object, and in the beginning, he didn't see it as his or yours or anyone's. It was just he was just is. And there's a unicity around everything. There's just total one symbiotic engagement with life. And then as his nervous system matured, he started saying, my bottle or my toy. And I am different than the little boy when he's going to school and stuff like that. I'm different than mom and dad. So the nervous system matures. And with that maturity comes a shock to the body that I am separate. And then we are pre-verbal. We don't have all the skills that we supposedly have as an adult. And then there is this inherent or innate adoption of a belief about oneself that contributed to this sense of lack that I'm experiencing as an early young kid. And so each of the 9 types experiences or codifies their belief about themselves through their 9 types. So for the type 1, it is all of this is occurring because I must be imperfect and that there's something wrong with me. And then the type 2 is this is going on in my life because I am worthless. And each of the 9 types, I am powerless, I am incomplete, I'm inadequate. I can go on, but fill in the blank that each one has their core belief that they believe not only about themselves, but others that are projected onto others and projected onto the world. So and those are the glasses, right? I referred to earlier before the Ellen Jarn glasses. So, like you could think of each of the 9 types as having their own unique color of glasses. Yes. So the type 1 is orange, type 2 is purple, red is for the 3, green is for the 4, so on. So when we, as a result, early on, put on those glasses, then our environment and our experiences shape how thick those glasses become, which means how much we over-identify and become very rigid or myopic in seeing the world in that very biased manner. And that's when we have 2 people come together with different levels of thickness of glasses and different colors, and aka different filters and conditioning are then clashing, right? So that to me is a quick little summary of how that evolves into all of those dynamics.
I like the visual of the thickness of the glasses. And so it was really just bringing it home in a way that could paint a picture of how 2 types can use the awareness, right? Because I think in Walensky's book, which is a book that you recommended, something called like Intimate Relationships. I don't know if it was his stance or he was sharing from a teacher, but in there, and you've said this, like we first need to be aware of what we're trying to or it's helpful to be aware of what we're trying to let go of for us to let go of it. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, you can't let go of something until you know what that is.
Yeah, so if someone, and I think in part, what would be really helpful, because like even with this knowledge of, okay, I see the world, which I super resonate with, as there's something, or especially historically, and a lot of when I think back to the most painful, charged moments, the most difficult plant medicine experiences, when I look at my journal and I like review what was going on, I was like, wow, how I was interpreting what came up, that event, when she said this, or when this business deal went this way, or when mom and dad did this, when I really felt into why did this affect me so deeply, and I dig deep enough, more often than not, I would touch on some aspect of like, wow, I really am petrified or was petrified. It made me feel somatically like I made a mistake or there's something wrong with me. And so I just realized like, holy shit, like the awareness of this when I'm in the shit, if I'm aware of it enough and I'm not completely like in the bottle per se, I can actually recognize like, oh, damn, like I'm on the goggles right now. And so I think the awareness is key. And like, I've heard this from clients, like, how do I like one, be aware of it, but how in the F do I take this off? Like to your point earlier, if I'm in relationship and both people are charged, like that process of being aware and taking it off, I'd love for you to talk us through that, but let's use the example of through maybe the 1 and the 2 as an example for this.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for calibrating me there.
Yeah.
So remember, so that the type 1 is looking at it through that there's something wrong with me. I am imperfect. the fear of making mistakes, and the shame of being bad, and bad meaning a character flaw. Like I'm flawed with my character and my code. The type 2 is coming from it through I believe, and the belief is so visceral. I mean, you can't negotiate with this. It has been believed in since childhood that I am worthless. I have the fear of being rejected and the shame of not being valued, right? So when you have those ingredients, those are the glasses we're wearing. So how do you take the glasses off? Part of it is, number one, is acknowledging that I have glasses to begin with.
Mm.
That's got to be a prerequisite, number one. So, one, well, that's why I use my assessment, which is to go through this with people so that they can see for themselves how their graph, their psychological fingerprint is actually showing up in which of the 9 types they're using to protect themselves and to navigate life, and ultimately how they've been trying to overcome that which they believe about themselves, which creates a lot of this inner conflict. I believe this about myself deep down, a lot of times unconsciously, subconsciously. And yet what we're conscious of are these patterns of compensation for trying to disprove that which I believe about myself, which I really don't want to, but I'm at the mercy of all of that conditioning. So although the adult intellect might understand that 1 + 1 is 2, the little boy in us might say, no, that's 8. And we're going to still live from the place that it's 8, right? So step number 1 is being really clear, or having that presented to them for them to consider ways in which they have not considered those pattern conditions. To the quote you were just referencing, you can't let go of something unless you know what it is. So, Carl Jung and other people make the quote and references, until you bring the conscious to light, you're going to call it fate, and etc. That famous quote. So I find that's very, very similar, right? So we have to first come to terms with what are the patterns that I've engaged in throughout life, and then really start reflecting on, well, what is that core, most fundamental, primal belief that I've adopted since early childhood? For us, Mike, the type 1 is I'm imperfect. There's something wrong with me. And for the type 2, it's I am worthless. So until I can see those patternings come up for myself, then yes, I have that level of awareness, belaboring that point, but that's step number 1. Step number 2 is then saying, I'm going to stop, hold up, and I'm going to pump the brakes, so to speak. Now, I use a metaphor sometimes. You might be historically in a speedboat, and initially you throw that speedboat into neutral. The wake of the boat is still going to carry you forward to some degree. But you begin, so it's not typically a hard stop. Like, you don't just start changing patterns of 30 and 40 and 50 years at the drop of a hat. So it becomes a process, and I would encourage everyone to be patient to undo what's been done for decades. So it's like throwing that boat into neutral. The wake of the boat's still going to carry it, but the velocity, the intensity starts diminishing over time, and eventually the boat comes to a standstill, right? So 1, we become aware of the pattern, and 2, we start inquiring and saying, I just need to stop. I know what this pattern is like. I know the consequences and the benefits that I've used this patterning from. Ideally, you've done a little bit of that work with a coach. And then you could say, okay, I'm just going to stop indulging in that pattern and give yourself a chance to rewire into a new entrainment, a new pathway for you to reconsider what's going on in your environment, and that, can I consider that there's another alternative to the pattern that I've indulged in for a long, long time that has been conflictual within relationship? So that would be step number 2. Then step number 3 would be is inquire. Looking at hey, am I coming from a place of compensation? You ask a lot of open-ended questions: who, what, when, how, and why, right? Am I coming from a place of compensation? Am I really trying to protect myself? On whose behalf am I trying to protect myself? The little conditioned parts of me, or am I truly representing the adult Mike or the adult Jason in this relationship? And that's a pretty interesting experience to really, some people will say, how old do I feel is another good question to experience for themselves. And then we can get into certain techniques like dismantling. You want to, I'll be careful with terms here, but dismantling meaning breaking up that pattern,
Yep.
to be clear. And the next step to me is becoming the witness or the observer with observing that patterning. So no longer being a full-blown participant, but the witness or the observer element within yourself to see it like a movie on a screen, rather than being sucked into the movie and the screen. You become more, I know this is playing itself out, I'm witnessing it. I joke with myself and clients that I work with, I'm like, get your popcorn ready because you're going to have a lot of observations and witnessing your conditioning, wanting to still go in certain patterns, right? Another phrase I'll use sometimes is it's like emotional gravity.
Yeah.
There's a inherent gravitational pull emotionally to go in that old pattern. And at times it feels uncomfortable, but helping become the witness or the observer of that old pattern is giving you the ability to create space. And we get so absorbed in this character, the persona, how we act out from that personality perspective, that it's really important for us to create psychological muscle to create separation from the event, the situation, the thought, the sensation in the body, the emotion, the words that maybe Lauren shares with you, the words that Zana shares with me, to take them as objects within our experience and not absorb them as if it's my identity. And I think that's a really important process, because until you create that separation initially, that's synonymous with our earlier part of the conversation. It helps you come out of that rabbit hole. It helps you come out of that myopic perspective that gets us all into trouble. It keeps those glasses on, where once you can create separation and become the observer of your experience, that's affording you the opportunity to take the glasses off, because you know the glasses are thoughts, ideas, limiting beliefs, associations, interpretations of myself, others in the world under the old pretense. And so by creating space, it allows me to take the glasses off. Then we typically will be in our parasympathetic nervous system. We can start to regulate ourselves, start to relax more into the present moment. And then we can start thinking of alternatives. How else? And then once you start asking ourselves these open-ended questions, you can say, well, how else could I have understood this situation? What, from her perspective, is she really trying to share with me in this moment if I were to guess? Until we do this separation and observer phenomena, answering that question honestly becomes labor. It's very, very difficult. And I know that I've done a lot of exercises with myself and with clients to know that it almost feels like a ripping. If I could say it that way,
That's a great way to
feels
say it.
intense. And almost like you're trying to peel off an old t-shirt that's wet, and like it sticks to the body and you're trying to take it, but once you take it off, it's like, whoa, like the world changes. Your countenance changes, your eyes change. There's a lot that happens. And then you can say, how do we solve this problem? You're no longer under the influence of your glasses now. And that observer phenomena allows you to do that, I think, in a way that's empowering, graceful, And the last thing I'll say is once you've had a taste of it and you've had a couple of experiences with doing that, it's kind of like you can't undo what has been done.
Yeah.
You can't undo that visceral experience. So then you say, now I know what it's like in the body to experience taking the shirt off that's been stuck to me or taking the glasses off, and how I can actually solve the conflict with my partner in a way that's meaningful, fulfilling, brings about deeper connectivity, because you've removed all the things that created or facilitated disconnection, so to speak. So the only thing that's left is your essence, her essence, and now you can connect at that level. And then trying to troubleshoot who's going to pick up the kid on Tuesdays, you, just like you did, it makes it comical. Like you kind of laugh. Okay, well, who's going to do it and how do you want to do it? Okay, cool. I'll pick him up. No problem. Not to suggest that everything goes away that quickly, but just to
Yeah.
piggyback on the idea that the ability to problem solve the dynamics or resolve or reconcile becomes so much easier and leads and facilitates to more connection.
Man, as you were sharing that, a few things came up. One of which is I think you used the word like labor. Like it is, in my experience, and I've got more compassion for myself, for Lauren, for us in relationship, for clients, the more that I learn about this and just realize I have 39 years of conditioning, right? And then I have my whole relationship dynamic, and we've fallen into our own patterns, and she's got her whole life. And so just to really anchor in like how much of a process and that ripping of this can be. And you used a few times like assumptions, interpretations, and limiting beliefs. And I want to define some of those terms, which in my training with you, like you speak about four main energy blocks. So I want to define that. But one story, real brief, that comes up is I remember even after having that, like even after having this knowledge, it can still be really hard for me personally. And I remember we were in the kitchen. This Luca must have been like one, and I was on my phone doing something. I don't know, it was work. It was something. Let's just say it was something important. And Lauren was doing the dishes, and Luca wanted to get my attention, but I was absorbed in the phone, and I didn't even realize that he was there, going, "Papa, Papa." And really, that's one of the things that really triggers Lauren, and I know it also stems from not just like her values, but also what she experienced growing up and her experience of that. But it brought up in her whether it was I was rejecting him, but she said like, and I don't even recall the tone of which it was in, but I remember something to the effect of like, he's trying to get you're not paying attention. That was it. Like, you're not paying attention. And it was so wild because I remember her words, and then I still viscerally remember immediately what I made it mean. And it was as if she literally said, "You're a bad father." That's how it was experienced to me, and that's what I internalized. And then I went through my own downward spiral. I don't remember, like a day or something like that, and I was withdrawn, I was quiet, I was beating myself up, and then projecting onto her. So I was lost in the sauce, right? And she had by no way, shape, or form, when we had the discussion after, she's like, "You're a fantastic father." And I explained to her like how I experienced that and what I was making it mean. And I want to use that as an example to tee up the energy blocks and to have you define those and how those show up in relationship.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So there are this notion of a gremlin. They call it a gremlin, or you can call it a false core, a false belief, which we refer to as for the type 2 is I am worthless, and for the type 1, I am imperfect. So it's a belief system and core beliefs and vows that you've taken on about self, others, in the world. Associations are simply as associating current day events through your historical experiences. And that could be, in some regards, similar to what you were giving voice to. Although interpretations is another one, which is really judgments of self and others that you were taught as a youngster. So you're interpreting it through those filters of judgments and ideas of what's right and what's wrong. And then limiting beliefs are those lesser, stingy, but still energetic beliefs and ideas. They're concepts that you, we sometimes people will call them, I'll even go out on a limb here and say identities. They are
Right.
ideas that you believe about yourself that may not raise as intense as the level of I am imperfect. But they are associated with, in many ways, the voice in the head of, I could have done this better. This is not fair. People who do this are not as good as people who do that. Those tend to be examples of limiting beliefs. So all of those, to simply say, is there are innate patterns of thinking, sensing, perceiving, and emoting that really speak to the different categories of our psyche, if you will, that have an energetic signature to them.
Mm.
And then that energy feels very sticky or gooey, although it feels normal and comfortable.
Right.
There's sometimes a heaviness about it.
Yeah.
So, those to me is all of that, the sum of all of those different ideas, beliefs, associations. I get the sense of even like a heaviness, even listing them. I mean, it feels like a laundry list, for crying out loud, right?
Yeah.
Then you take it where I have this tension in the body, I have this physical left knee pain, or you get into emotions. It's like, I have this sense of anger. There are times that I could flip a switch and have absolute rage and want to just punch someone in the face. All of those are just the totality of our energetic signature, our psychological fingerprint that we're walking around with consciously and unconsciously, about how we're trying to navigate life. And so it can be quite tricky. And that's why, appreciating the totality of all of those dynamics and influencing factors is important. Again, going back to that quote, you can't let go of something unless you know what it is, right? So it's important to appreciate where these different categories can help support that level of awareness, so that you could see the different aspects of my orange tinted glasses and what has contributed to the thickness of them. So it's then subsequent to that is inviting clients to go on a journey to say, if I were to list the top 25 interpretations that I have about
Mm.
myself that I project onto my partner in the world, what would those be? How does there's something wrong with me and I am imperfect? How is that really shaping and driving some of the things that I'm very passionate about? Because the sneaky thing with personality types, is that you can have supposed strengths and liabilities or weaknesses. But if you're not careful, both the positive and the negative could be serving as compensation patterns. And, you start chasing after the positive and trying to reduce the negative. But I've seen a lot and worked with a lot of people that just entrenches their ideas, their conditioned patterns, even further, which
Mm.
is another topic unto itself. But those are things to consider, that it's not always just about chasing after positivity, and I need to be positive, especially when the positive is being sought to cover and overlook the idea that I'm imperfect. So,
Man, that's so helpful. And I actually love that exercise of listing out, what are the top, like if you're listening to this right now, which obviously you are if you're here, but listing out the top 25 interpretations. Like take a list, go to town. What are the top 20, 25 assumptions that you're making? What are your top limiting beliefs? And then bringing those, and to have that even in partnership, I think is invaluable, because then as something comes up, and what also, like, to help the relationship, to help myself, to help Lauren help herself if I can, to help both of us. And there's also, I think, a big piece of this around, you and I were talking about this when you were out here, but like, I think this is also why it's really important to have a skill and a practice of being able to regulate ourselves, right? Because it can be when we're in it and two people are, say, age regressing or stuck in a pattern. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you were even talking, like, if both people are in it, both people are completely overly identified with their belief, one's I'm imperfect or one's I'm powerless or what, and they're bringing both of that, and they're blaming and they're shaming, and it's almost impossible to navigate through that unless maybe the charge goes down, or maybe we can view it from a wider vantage point. Am I off on that, or is that right when we were having that convo?
Yeah, I mean, for me, absolutely. It speaks to the earlier conversation we had that when uh, both are stuck in their conditioning,
Yeah.
we cannot relate. We can't connect.
Yep.
We're at a fundamental disconnection because the only thing that I hear, see, interpret is through my lens, my orange glasses. So it's better to figure out, okay, well, what works for me in stress moments like that? And I would encourage clients to consider those questions in between your triggers. Like, if that were to have, like, use it as part of the debrief with your partner. Can we have an agreement that if both are charged, we will do something? Now, you could say, you could be as symbolic as take a literal, not symbolic, but a literal step back. So a step backwards is an external cue to say, I can't verbalize, I'm so stuck, but I can take a step back. And
Interesting.
that's a cue to you that says, I need some space. Now, for others, you could say, like, it's basketball season, right? So take a timeout. Like, you could do that symbol. You could just say, I can't handle this right now. So can we come back to this? So have an agreement that says, okay, if both are in our conditioned response, what is the symbol or the gesture that we can make to each other that we are saying, okay, we're going to off limits. We're going to give each other fundamental space, and we're going to agree to that. So that becomes an agreement. So you just gave yourself an opportunity to have that conversation with each other. And so when it happens again, you could say, here, you could be silent. You could take a step back. You could say, I can't handle this right now. And then exercise that agreement. If you have that agreement and you're violating the agreement, then it fosters that conversation, which is, hey, we had an agreement. It's not like we don't know about this. What can we do to protect that agreement moving forward? And you can work through that question, right? I would say that that's an important step. Now, there's sometimes I've shared this with you and Lauren also, that when I am frustrated about something, before I hit that tipping point of no return, I will say to Zaina, can I off gas? Or the other question I asked to her is, if I rip, are you going to be okay? Like, that's kind of the phrase that I've used
let it
with
rip?
Zaina.
Like,
Let it rip.
Let it rip. Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
if I share my shit in this moment, are you stable are you regulated that you can handle it and not take a personal attack? Because, so we already have done a lot of that inner work to know what our agreements are. And so she's like, yep, bring it on, and I will rip. And she's holding space for me in that traditional sense of how we use that phrase. And so you can use whatever code you want. Can you hold space for me right now? Because it's not going to be pretty. Yes, I can. Okay, cool. Then I'm holding space. I have no judgment. I have no opinion. I'm not going to defend myself. I'm not going to defend you. I'm just going to allow you to do whatever it is that you need to do. And then at the end, we have a phrase, are you complete? That's what Zaina could say to me. That's the permission that agreement that we have. So she says, okay, this is a long pause. Is there anything else that you need, or do you feel complete? Then I'll say, yeah, I got more. Here it comes. Or no, I feel complete. And by that time, it's like anger, right? You feel the onset of the Hulk in you coming out. You experience the Hulk, but at some point, the green dude turns white again, right? In the old story of he goes back to his normal pre-anger phase, right? So by off-gassing, I
Right.
start to calm down. I start to regulate. When she says, do you feel complete? I'm like, yeah, I've ripped my shirt, my jeans. They're shrinking on me now. So I feel like I'm coming back to myself. And then we debrief the conversation. She's like, I'm curious, what was that all about? So we don't just part ways.
Yeah.
To the degree that we can. There's kids around and it's not always ideal, but at some point we earmark that and say, can we debrief? What was really going on for you, and et cetera. And now we're both have the glasses off, and now we can get back to that conversation, and I can take responsibility for that. So the key is I asking her, can she hold space? If she says, no, I can't, and she's done this, I'm not in a space to hold space for you,
Yeah.
then I would say, okay, cool. Then I'm going about my business. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go fucking punch a pillow. I'm going to go do something. I'm going to go work out. I'm going to do a couple of sprints, or I'm just going to go sit and meditate. It could be whatever works for the individual, but she's giving voice that I'm not in a space to hold space for you. And then I go do what I can to self-regulate myself as best as I can. And then when I feel to my own question, am I complete? And I say yes, then I go back to her and I say, hey, I feel complete. Do you feel complete yet or not? If she says yes, then and it's an opportunity, then we would debrief. If she's like, no, like, okay. And then at that point, I'm offering her, do you want me to hold space for you, or do you want to still self-regulate all on your own? And she's done both, right? No, I need space. Like, eliminate, leave me alone. I'm like, all right, cool. But I don't take offense to it. Like, I understand that's where she's at in her process. So hopefully that is a tangible example for people to consider.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And just one more thing though on that, Jay. So obviously you and Zaina both done a lot of work individually and together, and you guys have a lot of reps in this. For someone that's just dipping their toes in wanting to practice this, right? Like, one of the things that was coming up when you were sharing is, so imagine, say I come home and I do the same thing with Lauren, right? Like, or she does it with me. We can pick it either order. But the venting or the let it rip is actually directed at them. Like,
Right.
you fucked up, like whatever, like really, I don't know if we use whatever it is, but you're letting it rip and it's directed at them. They say they can hold it. And then real time, stuff's coming up. So if while they're holding, they no longer have the capacity to hold, what would you do then? Or is that just discussed in the debrief? Or in that point, just pause, like then we're back in it, pause. But when someone's just dipping their toes into this, and they're struggling with that, what would you offer to them?
So I think agreements, and I know that I've said this a lot, is really important.
Yeah.
And I think and feel like it's through the journey of figuring out what agreements mean for each other. So I always try to say, to reduce assumptions and ideas, take it a level up and say, hey, how do we think about this idea Jason sharing with Mike around agreements for us? Does that make sense? How are we doing with agreement? Do we even have them? Yes or no? And if we do have them, are they truly an anchor for how we function and interact with each other? You just get very curious and ask a lot of questions. Then you can get into the weeds, right? That's getting into the weeds. So
Okay.
that would be as you're noticing the attack feels too personal and tense,
Yeah.
and you feel triggered, the reality is they may come back and say, you're a real pain in the ass. You're a bastard for blaming me for that. Like now they're sucked into the story, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But rather than hiding from that, what I would encourage people to say is, great. It was an opportunity to say I was present. What was it that sucked me into this conversation that I couldn't maintain my presence? And debrief and have a conversation about that. And so
Cool.
maybe, hey, listen, I know we're both trying to put one foot in front of the other and start this as a process. But for me right now, where I'm at in my capacity, if you rip, I can't give you full discretion yet. I might have to give you 50%, and I will tell you when I'm at my limit. And you just negotiate that, and you just keep on tweaking it over time with all of these conflicts that you might have. And you keep tweaking and fine tuning. It's kind of like that instrument, right? You're so sensitive to the keys on the piano playing just right. But in the beginning, someone who doesn't have an acoustic ear is going to be like, I guess that sounds fine. And then you play it in the concert, you're like, oh, no. Now that I hear it in this kind of concert hall versus this hall, etc., we need to adjust the keys. And so I just think can you approach this from a curious learner's heart and mind? Can I be curious about life and just always ask those open-ended questions of who, what, when, how, why? Isn't that interesting? What did you feel in the body? Rather than how do you think and feel, like in the sense of like a lot of overt thinking, because a lot of people will get stuck in their head, but what did you experience in the body? So if my partner can only have a threshold of 50%, say, what were you feeling that really tipped you over in the body? Like, what were you really sensing? Where did that come from? And Zaina would probably say, well, my dad was really harsh on me more than the story she has is more than her other sisters. And therefore he was intense and blah, blah, blah. And, we've had that conversation before. So that's where I would start somewhere. Like, what do agreements look like? Can we have an agreements? How much should we invest in agreements? Can we test this out? What would it look like for us? And let's give it a shot. Not with the idea that us as type ones would say, we got to nail this perfect on step one. That kind of thing. It is an evolution in a journey. Zane and I this June will be together now, interestingly enough, 6 years. And so, yes, we both had done a lot of work. We've both learned a tremendous amount from the mistakes the supposed mistakes, I'll say it that way, that we made. So we came packaged a little different than our first respective relationships, but that just helped us navigate all of this space. And we've been fine tuning it over and over with subtleties throughout the whole 6 years. So if you think it's like, we're going to sprint, get it over with and move on to the next thing, good luck. I don't find that to be the case. Now, what I would say, though, is like anything else, right? When you go to the gym, you have muscle memory. It'd be like asking you with kettlebells, you're a world-class expert at it. So inherently, you've so entrained yourself that your level of functionality with it by just walking in the gym for the first time in even a couple of months, it's like old hat, It's like a bicycle ride. You just don't fundamentally forget it. So can I say that there are benefits like that in the journey? Absolutely. Do what I get upset about within myself about our relationship, does it happen at times? Sure. But it's a hell of a lot less frequent and less intense. And we stay stuck in that space a lot less. So those, just to throw the caveat out there, that's a criteria that if you want to use like some kind of objective / subjective qualitative data, you could say, hey, I used to get triggered with my partner about X. What's the frequency? Does it still happen at the same rate of frequency? Yes, no. And you can ask each other this. And when I do get triggered, is it the same level of intensity? And the third one is am I in that trigger for hours, minutes, seconds, days? Like, I used to be in it for days. Now I'm in it for hours. Okay. So you can use those three subjective criteria as a way to assess, how am I learning within this journey of applying these kinds of techniques, if you will.
Jay, I'm curious, is there ever a shadow side to agreements, or does that even pertain to what we're talking about?
Yeah, good question, Mike. So the shadow side of it is, we talked earlier today about functional and dysfunctional elements of codependency. So for me, the functional elements of agreements build dependency upon each other to live in a world and in our environment and execute and deal with life. The dysfunctional elements of codependency through the lens of agreements could mean is that I've put my eggs of in the basket of this agreement, meaning my own psychological peace, my happiness are now externalized onto and projected onto these agreements. And then therefore my peace is only because we have agreements in place, not because I have peace within myself, that these agreements are a reflection of that already existing inner peace that I have. So that if they if there's a partial violation or a full violation, I don't lose my serenity over it. It leads to a crucial conversation for sure, but I'm not going to lose my inner peace over that. So I think that is an element that people can watch out for with making these types of agreements. Those are the important parts, I would say, for now, that people watch out for with agreements. Lulling yourself into psychological safety just because you have an agreement. The other aspect, when we think about agreements and the words that we're using, I'm 54, Zane is 49. So I have 54 years of cumulative life experiences that I project consciously and even unconsciously onto these agreements. We might be using the same word. We could say connection, as you used the word before, connection. Well, what does that mean for you? Well, I have 54 years of a unique fingerprint that says connection is this. Zaina would say connection is this to me. So even within agreements, sometimes we got to get into the nitty gritty of what do these terms mean for you and for me? Because if we just say, hey, we want to have an agreement that we want to always have connection, or whatever you fill in the blank, that's 54 years of loaded terminology, right? So it can be shallow in the sense of not digging deep enough to understand the totality of what I'm really meaning, thinking and feeling and experiencing, and my conditioning that is being imposed upon just one word. So that's just another thing to consider with agreements as well.
Yeah, and the weight that we're putting on aspects of it and what we make it mean. Yeah, that's fascinating, bro. Yeah, this has been so helpful. I've really appreciated the depth, the breadth, and also the practicality of the tools, and also to assess and check in. The other thing that I really loved, just as a quick reflection, is how much you went into agreements. So last week, now this week, but I released a whole show on covert contracts. So just unspoken agreements. So this is like such a beautiful, and then taking everything that you went into and we went into today, and anybody who listened to last week's episode, it would just take it to a whole new level. So I just really loved where we explored today. As we wrap up, brother, what would you love to leave people with? I'm certainly going to leave in the show notes the Inner Compass 9 assessment. I've talked about it many times in the show. It's step one for the work that I do, to understand and uncover and provide a language to a lot of these patterns. But to leave people today, is there anything you want to, like a take home point, or anything you want to reinforce as we wrap today, my man?
There's a quote that I really love. Feel free to adopt or abandon this one. But it coincides with the conditioning and the persona and the mask that we wear, we've adopted, that the Inner Compass and the Enneagram assessment helps us highlight those masks that we've been wearing and how we're compensating, right? But ultimately, the phrase goes like this: we cannot become that which we already are. And therefore, we cannot be that which we're not. So if people can just consider that in light of our conversation and about the masks that I wear, who am I? What am I? And that to me would be a question worth considering.
I love it, man. Thank you so much, Jay. This has been super fun. Can't wait to have Uncle Jay back in town. Maybe there's another set of Matchbox cars. But really, man, just love getting to have you here and also drop in with you. So appreciate you so much, man. Thank you again.
Yeah, brother. Hugs and kisses. Send my love to the family.
I will.
Yeah.
Peace.